The Lord be with you. I'm Deacon Keith Fournier, and our first reading is from the book of Exodus. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh drove the sea back with a strong easterly wind all night, and made the sea into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went on dry ground right through the sea, with walls of water to right and left of them. The Egyptians gave chase, and all Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea after them. In the morning watch, Yahweh looked down on the army of the Egyptians from the pillar of fire and cloud, and threw the Egyptian army into confusion. He so clogged their chariot wheels that they drove on only with difficulty, which made the Egyptians say, "Let us flee from Israel, for Yahweh is fighting on their side against the Egyptians." Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, and let the waters flow back on the Egyptians and on their chariots and their horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and as day broke, the sea returned to its bed. The fleeing Egyptians ran straight into it, and Yahweh overthrew the Egyptians in the middle of the sea. The returning waters washed right over the chariots and horsemen of Pharaoh's entire army, which had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not a single one of them was left. The Israelites, however, had marched through the sea on dry ground, with walls of water to right and left of them. That day Yahweh rescued Israel from the clutches of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians laying dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the mighty deed that Yahweh had performed against the Egyptians, the people revered Yahweh and put their faith in Yahweh and in Moses, his servant. It was then that Moses and the Israelites sang this song in Yahweh's honor. "I shall sing to Yahweh, for he has covered himself in glory. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." And our response? From Exodus 15. "A blast from your nostrils and the waters piled high. The waves stood firm as a dike. The bed of the sea became firm ground. The enemy said, 'I shall give chase and overtake. I shall share out the spoil and glut myself on them. I shall draw my sword, my hand will destroy them.' You blew with your breath. The sea closed over them. They sank like lead in the terrible waters. You stretched your right hand out, and the earth swallowed them. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain which is your heritage, the place which you, Yahweh, had made your dwelling, the sanctuary Yahweh, prepared by your own hands." A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. Jesus was still speaking to the crowds when suddenly his mother and his brothers were standing outside and were anxious to have a word with him. Still speaking to the crowds when suddenly his mother and his brothers were standing outside and were anxious to have a word with him. But to the man who told him this, Jesus replied, "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Anyone who does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." The Gospel of the Lord.